a World War II trainer with a family connection. Neighborhood streets where airplanes have the right-of-way. Finger-licking good Texas barbecue, and a classic Sportster that's as fast as its name. All that and more on today's Wings to Adventure. You know, I don't know if it's the airplanes themselves or the freedom of flight that I love the most. Hi, I'm Tom Gresham. These wonderful machines capture the imagination and they take us to incredible places. For today's adventure, you're going to need a leather helmet and a bottle of barbecue sauce. Buckle up. A real stick and rudder plane that taught a generation of fighter pilots to fly. Whether seen at an air show, carrying the adventuresome on their first open cockpit ride, or as a crop duster, for many, the Boeing Stearman remains the essential biplane. Over half the pilots trained in World War II got their first flights in the Stearman, and today it's a favorite of those who love aviation history, or just delight in the goggles, leather helmet, and wind-in-the-face thrill delivered in every Stearman ride. Scott Perdue, call sign Gunny, flew F-4 and F-15 fighters for the Air Force. But for pure fun and a family connection, he straps into the Stearman.
That's a PT-17 Stearman. It's actually my dad's airplane. I inherited it from him, you could say. It's a World War II trainer. Back in World War II, they had probably about 3 different types of trainers, and this probably did about half of the pilot training, primary pilot training in World War II. It was designed by Lloyd Stearman, so everybody calls it a Stearman. But Stearman Company built it, but Stearman Company was owned by Boeing, so it's actually a Boeing. You want to freak a tower guy out, tell him Boeing so-and-so's on short final.
For Gunny Perdue, flying the Stearman is more than just a fun outing. It's also a family connection.
Like I say, it was my dad's airplane. It's been in the family about 26 years. Kind of grew up with it and through high school and all that, and learned how to fly. And my dad taught me how to fly this airplane. And it was involved in an accident in, was it, 92, and I spent about 10 years rebuilding it. After all that time, I took it to Oshkosh, 2003, and we won a bronze Lindy there, which is great. And that was a pretty good result after 9.5, 10 years of work. I spent some time enlisted in the Marine Corps and started my private license during that time, got my private license, and then with a college degree I went into the Air Force, and in the Air Force I flew F-4s and F-15Es, the Strike Eagle. The Stearman is just basic flying. It's stick and rudder, and the throttle and the stick is right where it's supposed to be, and the airplane's responsive and it's challenging to fly. It's rewarding. The reward is right now, but it's just fun flying, every bit of it.
It's not a high-performance aircraft, and that's part of the appeal.
The saying is on a Stearman, if you do everything at about 65 knots, you're doing good. And that's just about true. It'll do about 90 knots on cruise. But other than that, it's not, it will do 150 straight down. But that's about it.
A simple plane, the Stearman just seems more at home on grass strips.
The big thing about tail wheels is you got to kill your drift. And the grass is much nicer more tolerant.
It's a trainer, and it has lessons to teach. Some lessons come from the plane, but for Purdue, many lessons came from his father.
We shared it together. We used to fly it together and have landing contests. He was always better at 3 points than I was, but I got better at wheel landings than he was.
Leaving history and tradition aside, the main reason pilots and passengers love the Stearman is the experience of open cockpit flight.
You see the world in a whole different perspective, framed by those two wings.
Coming up, just west of Fort Worth, Texas, there's a place where hangars are more important than garages. You taxi down the street to your home, and even the swimming pools have an aviation theme. The dream of living with your airplane. Many pilots have dreamed of living with their airplane, having the hangar attached to the house, being able to go in and do a little work on it, or maybe even just look at that beautiful airplane. Well, the people here at Bourland Field Estates, just southwest of Fort Worth, Texas, are living that dream.
It's always kind of been a dream of mine. It seemed like driving all the way out to the airport to spend time with my airplane, which I spend a lot of. I've always liked enjoying working on them as well as flying, and do a little restoration work, and I also do a little teaching. So the thought of living right at the airport where all my toys are right next to my house seemed like a great idea.
The idea is to be close to your plane and to live with others who share your passion, if not obsession, with aviation. Here, you're just as likely to see a Beechcraft as you are a Buick on the streets. Remember, at Bourland Field, even on the streets, aircraft have the right-of-way. Ask them why they love airpark life, and one word keeps popping up.
Convenience, for me at least. I mean, being able, like building a kit airplane and being able just to walk out of your kitchen into the hangar to start work, it's fantastic. And then if you want to take a break, go in and get a cup of coffee, you know, it's 20 steps instead of a 20-mile drive or whatever.
You can wake up in the morning and the sun's shining and the birds are singing, and just run out and fire up and go fly around a pattern a few times. It's a great way to start the day. I got to realize one of my dreams here too. When I first moved here, I was a full-time flight instructor over at the Granbury Airport. And so for the first time in my life, I could go out in the morning, open the hangar, get in my airplane, fly to work, teach there all day, and then get my airplane and fly home. And that had always kind of been a dream of mine, and I got to realize that. So I was pretty lucky.
The convenience of walking out of your home and getting in an airplane and taking off, and not having to drive anywhere.
Part of the dream is designing and building a house and a hangar just the way you want.
Building for the pilots has been exciting because we get to be an integral part in fulfilling a part of their dream of living in an airpark, the convenience of living in an airpark where they're able to have their hobby close at hand rather than miles and miles away.
As long as you're building your dream, why not a swimming pool in the shape of a plane? Doug Steen's creation was the talk of the neighborhood.
My wife and two daughters and I, we just sat down and drew profiles of swimming pools, and one of us had the idea of an airplane, and then it was a consensus immediately. Everybody knew it had to be an airplane. So after a couple of days, we settled in on the plan form of the Bonanza. We tried to give it a V-tail, just like our Bonanza. With your imagination, you can imagine that the spa and the steps look kind of like gear wells.
The pilots may come to Bourland Field Estates thinking about planes and hangars, but they quickly realize there's something else that makes this place special.
I think a big part of it is the people. It's just a wonderful place to live because everybody has a common interest, and you open your hangar door and the next thing you know there's 4 people leaning in there talking to airplanes, and what could be better than that?
And there's just always something going on. The neighbors are just wonderful. There's usually at least one party a month, and we go out walking together, we do fly-ins together. It's not uncommon to get somebody to just call you and say, let's go out for breakfast, and we hop in our airplanes and fly somewhere and have breakfast. We just love being here because the neighbors are wonderful. We like the atmosphere. The whole subdivision is just beautiful.
Hardly a snap decision, many residents took years to find the right place.
Living in the air park has been a dream of mine. This is the 8th time I've relocated from one state to another with my employer, Lockheed Martin. And every time I have looked at air park homes. And this is the first time that we've been able to strike a compromise where my wife and I both felt like all of our needs were being satisfied.
A big part of that satisfaction is the social life, from a breakfast flyout to a hangar party.
It's not much different than living anywhere else, other than the fact that you can just taxi your airplane out down the street and go flying. You know?
I'm just in heaven. I'm 20 minutes from work, and we've got a hangar attached to the house. And
This is the most wonderful place we've ever lived in all of our lives. And we've lived in Saudi Arabia, we've lived in Alaska, we've lived in Washington State, we've lived all over. But this is number one.
Those looking for the intersection where life merges with dreams might want to mosey down to the Fort Worth area and visit Bourland Field Estates.
It's an ideal life.
What do flying and eating have in common? Well, if you're a pilot, you already know the answer to that question. Coming up, we're going to take you to the finest barbecue house in Texas.
Down the road a ways from the traffic and bustle of Dallas-Fort Worth is the rodeo town of Stephenville. It's the place to be if you're hankering some good victuals, and we are. More often than not, the pilots who land at Clark Municipal are there for one reason: their stomachs.
We're here at the Stephenville Airport. We've got the golf cart and we're off to the restaurant called the Hard 8. The guys here at the airport don't want to tell me what Hard 8 stands for, but maybe they just don't know.
It's true enough that the barbecue at the Hard 8 restaurant in Stephenville is good, but how many other places leave pilots the keys to the golf cart? Soon enough, we see the sign, but it's the smell of the mesquite and meat that leads us in. It doesn't take long to find other pilots. Paul Vettner is a student pilot, just completing his first cross-country solo. His instructor told him to fly to Stephenville and to be sure and stay for lunch.
Good, glad, congratulations.
Thank you.
Put her there, that's excellent. Everybody can remember being a student pilot.
Yeah.
You know, we all have stories. But listen, you know, you're paying yourself back by getting some hopefully great barbecue.
It looks really great. There's certainly a lot of pilots here.
And there are. Pilot Eldon Winston and friend Dwight Collum have flown in from Granbury, Texas.
This was just an excuse to get in the air today? Yeah?
You know, the food at the Hard 8 is good enough to have lured Eldon to Stephenville nearly 25 times. So let's see. That wouldn't be a $100 hamburger, more like a $2,500 brisket. Hard 8 manager Chad Decker is used to repeat customers. In 1 year, the restaurant sold
right at 110,000 pounds of brisket that we sold. Sausage was 26,000 pounds of sausage, 35,000 pounds of pork chops, 40,000 pounds of ribs.
a total of 272,000 pounds of meat in their first year in business. Why do people keep coming back?
We start out with just raw green mesquite wood and burn it down into coals. The greener wood, the coals seem to burn hotter and last longer, so we don't go through as much wood.
Does it give it a really distinct flavor?
It gives it a flavor. It's not an overwhelming smoky flavor.
Alrighty.
Levi Stowe has worked at the Hard 8 for over a year, getting in at 7 in the morning to begin preparing for the day.
How you doing?
They need to hire you for a Ginzu knife commercial.
Oh, yeah.
The reason pilots like the Hard 8 is that the Hard 8 likes pilots. Owners Vicki and Philip Nivens have a V-tail Bonanza that they used to fly a lot more before they opened the restaurant. But one thing is certain, a recent expansion to Brady will keep them Texas-bound. So if you're ever in Texas or Arkansas or Oklahoma for that matter, and have the desire to tootle around in a golf cart, learn a skill.
You gonna do it?
Sure.
Talk with some nice folks, and eat some of the best $100 barbecue you can imagine.
All right, now that you got a mouthful, how is it?
It's awesome.
Well, Stephenville is the place, but just try to remember not to take the cart keys home with you.
Blue skies and fair weather. It's what every pilot wishes for. But sometimes the weather up ahead isn't exactly perfect, and that's when you want to have a pretty good picture of what you're flying into. Well, it used to be you kind of had to guess and by gosh and look out the window. These days, it's almost like having the Weather Channel in your airplane, because now you can get the weather real time. What we're using is an electronic flight bag. In this case, it's a tablet PC for motion computing. We plug in a system called WeatherWorks, and it gets its signal from the XM satellites circling all over the place here, and we get the signal and we can see real-time weather. You can see rain, you can see lightning strikes, you can get the winds aloft. This even has the symbols for temporary flight restrictions, and these days that's really important. If something's going on, a presidential event, some kind of a rescue effort where they blocked off flights, it pops up on your screen and you can see it where it is and you can fly around it. This is an amazing device. You can see severe storms. It tells you where they are, which direction they're moving, and how fast they're moving. You can make your plans according to this. It couldn't be simpler. You plug it in, you turn it on, and you can see the weather. Point of fact is, WeatherWorks is here, it works. I've been using it for months now, and I consider this a no-go item when I'm flying in weather. Take a look at WeatherWorks. I think you're going to like what you see. Next up, one pilot's dream to own and fly the sporty Swift. You would be forgiven if, at first glance, you thought an approaching Swift was a World War II fighter. That's its heritage. This two-seat flying sports car has admirers and detractors, but those who own and fly the tiny tail dragger really love them. It seems right that Tom Mellon's 1949 Swift lives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, since that's where the planes were built, beginning in the early 40s. Mellon's feelings about his plane are typical of Swifters.
I love this airplane. It's definitely the most fun airplane I've ever had. I like the Swift. I've had quite a few different airplanes over the years, but the Swift is definitely my favorite. And I've always thought they were just a beautiful little sporty airplane, and that was probably even before I saw the Super Swift, where they're quite modified.
The original Swifts came with an 85 horsepower engine, but Mellon's plane has been extensively modified with a new engine and a sliding canopy.
This one has the Continental IO 360, which is a 210 horse and constant speed prop. So it's quite a performer. Every bit of horsepower makes them perform that much better. The sliding canopy gives it such a much more modern airplane look to it, and the visibility is fantastic. I've redone the panel, I've redone the interior. We'll put all new leather interior in it. On the panel, everything is either new or rebuilt. and then just polished the airplane up with a good coat of McGuire's wax, and that was it. So the airframe's just like I bought it.
Ask a Swift owner why, and you'll hear about the sheer joy of flying.
They are really light on their controls. It's almost a small fighter. I've heard them described as a P-51 without the belly scoop. Now, obviously, they don't have the power that P-51 has, but they are really wonderful controlling airplanes, and that I would say that would be the case on all of them across the board, whether it was an 85 horse or the 210 horse or anything in between. You can literally fly them with 2 fingers on your controls.
Sometimes calling themselves caretakers, Swift owners delight in showing off their vintage speedsters.
I've had a lot of people that see that airplane, and when they find out it's a 1949, they just drop their jaw. It was probably a little bit ahead of its time. The flap gear has been mixed up more than once. The flap's on the right, but it looks like a little control wheel as far as a tire, and the actual gear lever looks like a flap. And so that's probably one thing that could have been designed better on the Swift, but just don't get those mixed up.
Whether made by Globe, the original manufacturer, or Temco, who came along later, whether original or highly modified, such as Mellon's Super Swift, one flight in this miniature fighter will hook you.
They're a blast to fly.
Texas barbecue and vintage planes. Gotta love it. Hey, if you have a favorite plane or a flying destination, tell us about it at wingstoadventure.com. Thanks for sharing this flight with us. We'll see you next time.